I was sitting at my grandfather's kitchen table, holding a 3-page handwritten letter from my father. After 5 years of complete silence, no calls, no texts, nothing, he'd finally reached out. And I'm not going to lie, I was about to cry. The memories he described, the things he said he remembered about us, it felt real. It felt like maybe he actually wanted me back in his life. Then my grandfather, sick as he was, squinted at the page and said, "Wait, what's that?" And that's when I realized every single memory in that letter was a lie. Before I continue with my story, it really helps to know that someone out there is listening. So if this is resonating with you in any way, or if it simply caught your attention, please let me know in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from, or just say hello. There's something incredibly comforting about knowing I'm not alone in this. Thanks a lot. Now, back to the story. My cousin Kevin was standing in Grandpa's kitchen when I got there, which was already wrong. Kevin never came by on weekdays. He worked construction in Fredericksburg, 40 minutes away, and I'd maybe seen him at Grandpa's house 3 times in the last 2 years. Thanksgiving, Christmas, and once in April when he needed to borrow Grandpa's chainsaw. But here he was at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, leaning against the counter like he belonged there, eating a sandwich he'd made from Grandpa's groceries. "Nora," he said it like a greeting but also like a warning. "Didn't know you were coming today." "I come every Tuesday and Thursday." I set the grocery bag on the table. "Where's Grandpa?" "Napping. Your car wasn't in the driveway, so I figured." "I parked on the street. Plumber's coming later, needs the driveway space." I started putting away the groceries, fresh milk, the bread with the seeds Grandpa liked, lunch meat, oranges. "What are you doing here, Kevin?" He took another bite of his sandwich, chewing slowly. Kevin had this way of using silence to avoid answering questions, like if he just waited long enough, you'd forget you asked. It worked on his mom. It didn't work on me. "Kevin, just visiting." He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "He's my grandpa too, you know." "I know that. So I can visit." "You can visit any time you want. You just don't." He didn't say anything to that. I finished putting away the groceries and folded the paper bag flat, tucking it into the drawer where Grandpa kept them. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the clock in the living room and the hum of the refrigerator. I could hear Grandpa's oxygen concentrator running down the hall. "How's he doing?" Kevin asked. "Same as last week, same as the week before." Mom said the doctors gave him 6 months. That was in January. "Doctors aren't psychics." "I'm just saying," Kevin set down his sandwich. "I'm just saying he's still here, that's good." I looked at him, really looked. Kevin was 2 years older than me, 34, and we'd grown up more like siblings than cousins because his mom and my mom were so close. But after everything with my dad, Kevin's side of the family had gotten weird. Not openly hostile, just careful, like they were always measuring which way the wind was blowing before they said anything. "What do you want, Kevin?" "Jesus, Nora," he laughed, but it wasn't a real laugh. "Can a guy visit his grandfather without getting interrogated?" "You can, but you're not. You're here for something." He picked up his sandwich again, then put it back down. "Mom wanted me to talk to you." There it was. "About what?" "About your dad." I turned around and opened the refrigerator, pretending to check if there was enough room for the milk. The truth was I just didn't want to be looking at Kevin when he said whatever he was about to say. "What about him?" "He wants to reach out. He's been thinking about it for a while, apparently. Mom says." "Your mom hasn't talked to my dad in years." "She talks to Denise." Denise, that name still landed differently even after all this time. 17 years. You'd think it would stop mattering. "So your mom talks to Denise," I said, still facing the refrigerator. "And Denise talks to my dad, and my dad wants to reach out. And instead of just reaching out, he goes through Denise to your mom to you, and you drive 40 minutes on a Tuesday to what? Ask my permission." "It's not like that." "What's it like then?" Kevin was quiet for a long moment. When I finally turned around, he was looking at his sandwich like it held the answers. "He's trying, Nora. He knows he messed up. He knows he wasn't there. But people change and..." Do they? Some people do. Has he changed? Kevin didn't answer. Has he called me, texted me, sent me a birthday card, written me an email, shown up at my door, done literally anything in 5 years? That's what I'm saying. He's been thinking about it. He's working up to. Working up to what? I don't know. Kevin's voice went tight. I don't know, okay? I'm just the messenger. Mom asked me to come by and see if you'd be open to it. That's all, just open to it. I leaned against the counter across from him, crossing my arms. What changed? What do you mean? 5 years of nothing, and now suddenly he's working up to reaching out. What changed? Kevin's eyes shifted, just for a second, just enough. Nothing changed, he's just... Kevin, I don't know what you want me to say. The truth would be nice. He picked up his sandwich again, took a bite he didn't seem to want, chewed, swallowed. Maybe it's the whole thing with Grandpa, you know, makes you think about family, mortality, all that. Grandpa's been sick for 1.5 years. Yeah, but now he stopped. It's what? You know what, everyone knows. Say it. Kevin looked at me, and for a moment I almost felt bad for him. He was caught in the middle, like he'd always been caught in the middle. His mom was my dad's sister, which meant Kevin had grown up hearing both sides, or at least both versions of what my dad had done. There was the version I knew, the one where my dad emptied the savings account, told my mom he was going on a work trip, and never came back. And there was the version Kevin's family told themselves, the one where my parents' marriage was already falling apart, and my dad just made a hard choice, and Denise wasn't the reason, just the catalyst. The will, Kevin said finally. People are talking about the will. What people? I don't know, just people. Mom, mostly. She's worried that Grandpa's going to cut out. He stopped again. Cut out who? It's not my business. But you're here. Because Mom asked me to come, that's the only reason. He pushed back from the counter. Look, I'm just saying, your dad wants to reconnect. Maybe the timing is weird, maybe it's not for the best reasons, I don't know. But he's your dad, Nora. He's the only one you've got. I let that sit there between us. The only one I've got. Like family was something you were stuck with no matter what they did. Like shared blood erased everything else. Tell your mom thanks for her concern, I said. And tell her I'm not interested. Kevin sighed. She's going to ask me what you said. You can tell her what I said. She's going to want to know why. She knows why. He grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair, stuffing his arms into it. You're allowed to change your mind, you know. People are allowed to make mistakes. He didn't make a mistake. He made a choice. A lot of choices, actually, over a lot of years. Kevin was at the back door now. He paused, one hand on the handle. You know I love you, right? I'm not trying to take sides. I know. I just think, he shook his head. Never mind, I'll tell Mom you're not interested. He left. I stood in the kitchen listening to his truck start, back out of the driveway, disappear down the road. Then I poured myself a glass of water and went to check on Grandpa. He was awake, propped up in his hospital bed with the TV on mute. The oxygen tubes were in his nose, and his eyes were closed, but I could tell he wasn't sleeping by the way his fingers moved, picking at the edge of the blanket the way he always did when he was thinking. Hey, I said from the doorway. His eyes opened. Thought I heard Kevin. You did. What do you want? I pulled the chair closer to the bed and sat down. His mom sent him to talk about my dad. Grandpa's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes went sharp. Even sick, even on oxygen, even after 18 months of cancer slowly eating away at him, Walter Sullivan didn't miss much. What about him? He wants to reach out, apparently. Grandpa made a sound that might have been a laugh if he'd had more breath for it. Now, after 5 years of nothing. That's what I said. And what you say to Kevin. That I wasn't interested. Grandpa nodded slowly. Good. I picked up the remote and turned off the TV, even though it was already on mute. I just needed something to do with my hands. You remember the loan, Grandpa said. It wasn't a question. The one you gave him when he was starting the business. $42,000, supposed to be paid back in 5 years. He coughed, a wet sound. That was 2006. He never paid it back. Not a cent. And when I asked about it, this was maybe 2010, 2011, he told me I was confused. Said the money was a gift, not a loan. Said I was misremembering. I hadn't known that part. What did you do? I had the paperwork, the original agreement signed and dated. I showed it to Patricia. Grandpa's jaw tightened. She said I must have forged it, that I was trying to cause trouble in Rick's marriage. To Denise. To Denise. He picked at the blanket again. I stopped bringing it up after that, but I didn't forget. The hospice nurse, Barbara, arrived at 3:30. She was a sturdy woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense voice and gentle hands, and Grandpa liked her because she didn't talk to him like he was already dead. She changed his sheets, checked his vitals, adjusted his medications, and asked about his pain level with the same matter-of-fact tone she might use to ask about the weather. While she worked, I went to the kitchen to start dinner. Grandpa didn't eat much anymore. The cancer had spread to his stomach, and most food made him nauseous. But I still made soup every time I came over. Chicken broth with vegetables, nothing too heavy. The plumber came and went. I paid him with a check from Grandpa's account, which I'd been managing for the last 8 months. Somewhere in the middle of everything, between the diagnosis and the surgery and the chemo that didn't work, Grandpa had added me to his bank accounts and given me power of attorney. His lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Claire Hendricks, had handled the paperwork. That night, after Barbara left and Grandpa was asleep, I sat in the living room with a box I hadn't opened in years. Old photographs, letters, the detritus of a family that used to exist. There was a picture of my dad holding me when I was maybe 2 years old. He was grinning at the camera, young and handsome, and I was reaching for something out of frame, a balloon, maybe, or a bird. I didn't remember the moment, but I'd looked at this picture so many times growing up that I'd convinced myself I did. There was another picture from my 8th birthday. My mom had made a chocolate cake shaped like a dinosaur. I was going through a dinosaur phase, and my dad was supposed to be there but wasn't. Business trip, she'd said. Very important meeting. In the photo, you can see the empty chair next to me, the extra slice of cake that never got eaten. I flipped through more pictures. My dad was in maybe a third of them. The rest were just me and my mom, or me and Grandpa, or me by myself in front of various landmarks. The Grand Canyon, the Statue of Liberty, the beach at Cape Hatteras. Cape Hatteras, I stopped at that one. I was standing on the sand, squinting into the sun, and behind me the ocean stretched out forever. I remembered that trip. The screened-in porch. The wild horses we'd looked for and never found. The sand in my shoes. In the picture, Grandpa was standing next to me. Not my dad. Grandpa. I looked at the back of the photo. Someone had written a date in pencil, August 2002. I would have been 10 years old, the summer before 5th grade. I put the photos away and went to bed, but I didn't sleep well. I kept thinking about the empty chair at my birthday party, the business trip that was more important than my dinosaur cake. The next week, I found out what my Aunt Patricia had really been doing. It started with a phone call from Claire Hendricks, Grandpa's lawyer. She called me on a Wednesday afternoon, which was unusual. Claire didn't make casual calls. "I need to tell you something," she said, "and I need you to stay calm." That's not a great opening. "I know, but you need to hear this." She paused. "Your grandfather's been getting visits from your aunt. Patricia's been coming by. Not to see your grandfather, to see me." I waited. "She's been asking questions about the will, about what happens if your grandfather changes his mind, about what it would take to prove incompetence." My stomach dropped. She's trying to say he's incompetent. "She's exploring the possibility. She hasn't filed anything official, but she's been gathering information." Claire's voice was careful. "She asked me about the medications he's on, whether any of them could affect his judgment. She asked about the pain management, whether that could be considered impairment." "Can she?" I stopped, tried again. "Is that even possible? He's perfectly lucid." "He is. I've seen him multiple times over the past few months, and there's nothing wrong with his mental faculties. But that doesn't mean she won't try. Why are you telling me this? Because your grandfather needs to know, and because I think you should be prepared for what's coming. I told Grandpa that evening. He was having a good day. He'd eaten half a bowl of soup and managed to sit up for a few hours, and I almost didn't want to ruin it, but he needed to know. When I finished telling him, he was quiet for a long time. "She's been doing this for years," he said finally. "Different versions of it. When your grandmother was dying, Patricia tried to get herself put in charge of the estate, said your grandmother wasn't in her right mind. We had to get a doctor to come to the house and examine her, write a letter saying she was competent. Cost us $1,000. I didn't know that. You were a kid. We didn't want to worry you." He shook his head slowly. "Patricia's not a bad person. She's just afraid, always has been, afraid of not having enough, not being enough. And when she's afraid, she does things. That's not an excuse." "No, it's not." He looked at me. "I want you to know, whatever happens, the will is solid. Claire made sure of it. They can contest all they want, but they won't win." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." He reached for my hand, his grip weaker than it used to be. "You've been here, through all of this. You didn't have to be." "Yes, I did." "No, you didn't. You could have let Patricia handle it. You could have stayed home, come by on holidays, waited for the phone call telling you it was over." He squeezed my fingers. "But you didn't. You were here. That means something." I stayed until he fell asleep. Then I drove home, my actual home, not Grandpa's house, for the first time in 3 days. I needed to shower to check my mail, to remember what my own apartment looked like. There was a message on my answering machine from my mother in Oregon. She called every few weeks to check in, and I'd been meaning to call her back but kept forgetting. I listened to the message, just her voice, saying she hoped I was okay, saying she was thinking about Grandpa, saying she loved me, and then I sat on the couch in the dark for a long time. My mother had moved to Oregon after she remarried, when I was 23. She'd met a man named Dennis who was kind and stable and nothing like my father, and they'd moved across the country to be near his kids. I didn't resent her for it. She'd earned a second chance at happiness, but sometimes I missed her in a way that felt childish. I fell asleep on the couch and woke up at 3 in the morning to my phone buzzing. A text from Barbara. "Your grandfather is asking for you." I drove back to his house in the dark. The roads were empty. The streetlights flickered past in a blur. Grandpa was awake when I got there, propped up in bed with the lights on. Barbara was in the hallway, looking worried. "He won't take his medication," she said. "Says he needs to talk to you first." I went into the bedroom. Grandpa's eyes were bright, feverish. "Close the door," he said. I closed it. "I need to tell you something." His voice was stronger than it had been in weeks. "About your father, about the money." "What money?" "The loan wasn't 42,000. It was 60. I lied about the amount because I was embarrassed." I sat down in the chair next to his bed. "I gave him $60,000 in 2006. He was going to start a contracting business, he said. Him and a partner, they had a whole business plan." Grandpa laughed, a dry, painful sound. "The partner was Denise, did you know that?" "No." "They were already together, before the divorce, before any of it. The business was just a cover for them to spend time together. By the time I figured it out, the money was gone. Spent on, I don't even know, trips probably, hotels. The business never existed." "You never told me." "I couldn't. You were still hoping he'd come back. Your mother was still hoping. And I—" He stopped, coughing. I reached for the water, but he waved it away. "I kept thinking if I just gave him enough time, he'd pay it back. He'd make things right. He'd be the son I thought he could be." "But he didn't." "He didn't. And then your mother filed for divorce, and he moved to Charleston with Denise, and I stopped pretending." I sat there absorbing this. $60,000, a fake business, a lie that had lasted 20 years. "Why are you telling me now?" "Because Patricia's going to try to make me look confused. She's going to say I don't know what I'm talking about, that my memories aren't reliable." He met my eyes. I need you to know the truth, the real truth, so when they start lying, you'll know. I believe you. Do you? I've always believed you. He nodded slowly. There's something else. In the filing cabinet in the office, the bottom drawer, there's a folder labeled Sullivan Family. Inside that folder is the original loan agreement, plus copies of the checks I wrote him and a letter he sent me in 2008 asking for more money, promising he'd pay everything back with interest. He laughed again, but there was no humor in it. Keep that folder safe. Don't let Patricia find it. I found the folder that night. The loan agreement was typed on old paper, the signatures faded but legible. The checks were made out to Richard Sullivan for various amounts, $20,000, $15,000, $25,000. And the letter was handwritten, my father's looping script asking Grandpa for another $10,000 to cover unexpected business expenses. I made copies of everything. I put the copies in a safe deposit box at my bank and left the originals where Grandpa had hidden them. 2 weeks later, Patricia showed up at the house again. This time, she didn't bring a casserole. She came with her husband, George, who stood by the door looking uncomfortable while Patricia settled herself at the kitchen table like she owned the place. We need to talk about Dad's care, she said. What about it? He's declining. The doctors say he might only have a few weeks left. I know that. And yet you're still, she stopped, recalibrated. What I mean is, it's a lot for one person to handle. Maybe we should look into other options. Like what? A facility, somewhere with round-the-clock care. Hospice, obviously, but a real facility with real professionals. He's getting hospice care here. Barbara comes every day. Barbara's a nurse. I'm talking about a full medical staff, people who can handle emergencies. He doesn't want to go to a facility. He wants to die at home. What he wants and what's best for him might not be the same thing. I stared at her. Are you serious right now? I'm trying to help, Nora. You're obviously overwhelmed. I'm not overwhelmed. You've been living here for weeks. You're barely going to work. Your boss called me, did you know that? I felt cold. What? He found my number somehow. Personnel file, maybe. He was worried about you. Said you've been missing deadlines, not returning calls. That's none of your business. It became my business when you started neglecting your responsibilities. Someone has to look at the big picture here. I stood up. Get out. Excuse me. Get out of this house, now. Nora. This is Grandpa's house, and you're not welcome here. If you have concerns about his care, you can put them in writing. Otherwise, leave. Patricia stood slowly. Her face was calm, but I could see something flickering behind her eyes, anger, maybe, or calculation. You're making a mistake, she said. You think you're protecting him, but you're not. You're isolating him, cutting him off from his family. You're his family. You could come visit any time you want, but you don't come to visit, you come to take. That's not. It is. It's exactly what this is. You want him in a facility because you want access. You want to be the one making decisions. You want to be the one controlling everything. George cleared his throat from the doorway. Patricia, maybe we should. Be quiet, George. Patricia's eyes never left mine. You think you're the only one who loves him. You think you're the only one who cares. I think I'm the only one who shows up. I've been busy. For 18 months. Too busy for a single visit that wasn't about money or the will or what you might inherit. Patricia's face went red. That's not fair. It's exactly fair. You weren't here for the surgery. You weren't here for the chemo. You weren't here when he couldn't eat for 3 weeks and lost 20 pounds. You showed up when you wanted something, and you're showing up now because you want something else. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I walked to the door and held it open. Get out. She left. George followed, muttering an apology that I didn't acknowledge. When they were gone, I closed the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. My hands were shaking. Grandpa was awake when I checked on him. He'd heard everything. The walls were thin, and his hearing was still good. You okay? He asked. Not really. Come here. I sat next to his bed. and he put his hand on mine. "She's going to keep pushing," he said. "She's not going to stop." "I know. You're going to have to be strong." "I know. And you're going to have to be right." He squeezed my fingers. "Not just feel right, be right. Have the proof, have the documents, have everything lined up so there's nothing they can twist." "I already did that, the folder you showed me." "Good, keep it safe." He closed his eyes. "She's scared, you know, Patricia. She's been scared her whole life that there won't be enough, that she'll end up with nothing." "That's not an excuse." "No, it's not." He opened his eyes. "But understanding why people do things, that helps. It doesn't make it okay, it just helps." I stayed with him until he fell asleep. The next few weeks were the hardest. Grandpa's condition worsened. He stopped eating almost entirely. The pain got worse, and Barbara had to increase his medication. There were days when he barely recognized me, and other days when he was lucid enough to tell stories about my grandmother or his time in the army or the years he'd spent working at the hardware store. Patricia didn't come back, but she called. Every day, sometimes multiple times a day. I stopped answering, let the calls go to voicemail. The voicemails were variations on the same theme. I was isolating Grandpa, I was taking advantage of him, I was going to regret this. She was talking to lawyers, she was exploring her options. I saved every voicemail. I printed every email. I kept a log of every phone call with dates, times, and summaries of what was said. And then, on a Thursday in late March, the letter arrived. I didn't know what it was at first. The envelope was plain, white, hand-addressed in blue ink. The return address was a town called Dawsonville. I didn't recognize it, but when I looked it up later, it was about 40 minutes from my father's last known address. I brought it inside with the rest of the mail and left it on the kitchen table while I made Grandpa's soup. It wasn't until I was straining the broth that I looked at the handwriting again and felt my hands go still. I knew that writing. 20 years ago, my father had signed my birthday cards with the same looping letters, the same way he made his RS, the same way he connected his vowels. I didn't open it. I just stared at it while the soup cooled, thinking about all the years of silence, all the missed calls and canceled visits and broken promises. After 5 years of nothing, not a phone call, not a text, not even a Facebook message, my father had sent me a letter. I picked it up, set it down, picked it up again. Barbara came out of the back bedroom. "Everything okay?" "Fine, just mail." She glanced at the envelope but didn't ask. Barbara had been coming to the house for 8 months. She knew better than anyone what kind of landmines were buried in this family. I waited until Grandpa was asleep, until the house was dark and quiet. Then I sat at the kitchen table and forced myself to open it. 3 pages, handwritten, both sides of each page filled with my father's looping script. "Dear Nora, I don't know where to begin. That's probably a cliché, but it's true. I've written this letter so many times in my head, practiced it in the shower, in the car, lying awake at 3 in the morning. And now that I'm finally putting pen to paper, I don't know what to say. I know I haven't been there. I know I made mistakes. More than mistakes, I made choices that hurt you, and I have to live with that. Every day, I have to live with that. Do you remember the summer you turned 12? We drove to Cape Hatteras, just the 2 of us, and rented that little house with the screened-in porch. You wanted to see the wild horses, and we spent 2 whole days driving up and down the beach looking for them. We never did find any, but you said you didn't care. You said the trip was about the looking, not the finding. I think about that sometimes, about who you were then, about who I was. My hands were shaking. I remembered that trip. I remembered the screened-in porch and the wild horses and the sand in my shoes that I couldn't get out no matter how many times I shook them. I kept reading. I know it doesn't make up for anything. I know words are cheap, and I've given you plenty of words that turned out to be worthless. But I need you to know, not a day goes by that I don't think about you. Not a day goes by that I don't regret the choices I made. I think about the 4th of July when you were 8, and I taught you how to light sparklers in the backyard. You were scared at first, but then you held one up and drew your name in the air, over and over, until the whole box was empty. I still have the picture somewhere. You and me and the sparklers, your face lit up with that huge smile. I think about driving you to your first day of high school. You were so nervous you barely talked the whole way there, and I didn't know what to say either, so we just listened to the radio. I think it was an oldies station, Motown maybe. And when you got out of the car, you turned around and waved, and I remember thinking, she's going to be okay. She's going to be more than okay. I know about Grandpa. I know he's sick. Patricia told me, and I've been thinking about him a lot, about what he meant to me, about all the things he taught me that I never properly thanked him for. He was a good father, better than I deserved. And I know you've been taking care of him, and that doesn't surprise me at all, because you always were the one who showed up. You always were the one who did the right thing, even when it was hard. There was more. Another page and a half about memories, about regret, about wanting to make things right, about hoping we could talk, about a phone number where I could reach him if I was ready. By the time I finished, my eyes were burning. My throat was tight. Something in my chest was opening up against my will, something I'd kept locked away for years. I thought about calling the number. I thought about what I would say. I thought about the Cape Hatteras trip and the sparklers and all the little moments he'd remembered that I'd thought he'd forgotten. Maybe people did change. Maybe Patricia was right. Maybe. I heard the oxygen concentrator shift rhythm, then the sound of Grandpa coughing. I gathered up the pages, still shaking, and walked to his room. He was propped up in bed, eyes open, watching me come through the door. "What's that?" His voice was rough, but his eyes were sharp. "A letter from," I couldn't finish. "From who?" I handed him the pages, let him see the handwriting. "That's Rick's writing," he said. "Yeah." Grandpa held the pages close to his face. His eyesight had been getting worse and started reading. I watched his expression as he went. Not anger, something more like concentration, like he was studying a blueprint for a house that didn't make sense. When he finished the first page, he set it down and kept reading, then the third. Then he went back to the first page and stopped. "Come here," he said. "Sit down." I sat. He held up the first page. "The Cape Hatteras trip, he says you were 12. I remember it." "Do you?" He looked at me steadily. "You were 12 when that trip happened." I nodded, but something in his tone made me uncertain. "Think about it." I tried to remember. The wild horses, the screened-in porch, the sand in my shoes, the picture on my wall. The picture. The one I'd looked at a few weeks ago, late at night, when I was going through old photos. The one with me standing on the beach, squinting into the sun. The one with Grandpa standing next to me. "You were 10, Grandpa said. The summer before 5th grade, I drove you to the airport because Rick's flight got delayed. He never made that trip with you. I did." I stared at him. "Keep going." Grandpa picked up the second page. "The sparklers, 4th of July, you were 8. "I don't remember that." "That's because it didn't happen with him." Grandpa's voice was flat. "I taught you how to light sparklers in my backyard. Your grandmother took the picture." The room felt very quiet. "He's describing things that happened," Grandpa continued. "But not with him, with me." I reached for the pages, but Grandpa held them back. "The first day of high school," he said. "He claims he drove you." "Mom drove me." "That's right, your mother drove you. Rick was in Asheville that week, with Denise. I remember because Patricia called to complain about it. He'd promised to be there for your first day, and then he canceled at the last minute." I sat there, not moving, not breathing. "He's not remembering things," Grandpa said. "He's making them up, or someone fed him these stories and he's claiming them as his own." "Why would he?" "Look at the third page, the bottom." I took the pages from him and found the passage. "I know about Grandpa. I know he's sick." "He knows I'm sick," Grandpa said. "He knows you've been taking care of me. He mentions that you always show up." He met my eyes. "Patricia told him about the will, about being cut out." "You don't know that." "I know my son." Grandpa's voice was tired but certain. "I know what he sounds like when he wants something, and I know what he sounds like when he's performing." I looked down at the pages in my hands. At the looping handwriting, the careful sentences, the memories that had made my throat tight and my chest ache. The Cape Hatteras trip, Grandpa's trip. The sparklers, Grandpa's sparklers. My first day of high school, the day my father was in another state with another woman. He researched it, I said slowly, or someone told him what to write. Patricia, maybe Denise, someone who knew enough stories to sound convincing. Grandpa reached for my hand, but not enough to get the details right. I sat there, holding the letter, feeling the warmth I'd felt while reading drain out of me. All the hope, the grief, the desperate wanting, it was turning to something cold and hard. He doesn't know me, I said. He doesn't know anything about me. No, he doesn't. He just wants the money. Grandpa was quiet for a moment. Then, yes. I stood up. My legs felt strange beneath me. I walked to the window and looked out at the backyard, the garden Grandpa had kept for decades, the old oak tree I used to climb as a child. What do I do? You don't have to do anything. He sent a phone number. He wants me to call. You don't have to call. I turned back to face him. How did you know about the details? The Cape Hatteras trip, the sparklers, how did you remember all of that? I was there, Grandpa said simply. I remember because I showed up. Grandpa died on a Tuesday in April. It was quiet. He went in his sleep, Barbara said, probably around 4 in the morning. I'd been sleeping in the guest room and I didn't hear anything. The funeral was small. Grandpa hadn't wanted a big service. No fuss, he'd said. Just plant me somewhere nice and get it over with. Patricia came. So did Kevin and Rachel, a handful of neighbors, some old friends from the hardware store. Claire Hendricks was there too, staying near the back. My father didn't come. The reading of the will happened 2 weeks later, at Claire's office. Me, Patricia, Kevin, Rachel, Claire at the head of the table. And then the door opened, and my father walked in. He looked older than I remembered. Gray hair, weight around the middle, a softness to his face. But his eyes were the same, watchful, calculating, always assessing. Sorry I'm late, he said. Traffic. He sat down next to Patricia. She put her hand on his arm. Claire cleared her throat. We're here for the reading of Walter Sullivan's will. Mr. Sullivan, you were not initially informed of this meeting because you're not a beneficiary. However, you have a right to be present. I'm aware. She read the bequests. To Patricia, $50,000 and some personal items. To Kevin and Rachel, $10,000 each and a few small things. To me, the house, the land, and the remainder of the estate. The room was silent. That's it. My father's voice was quiet. That's it. The will was finalized 3 months ago. Mr. Sullivan was of sound mind. So I get nothing. That's correct. He was my father. That was his choice. My father's jaw tightened. His choice, or someone else's. He was looking at me now. You did this, he said. You turned him against me. I met his eyes. You weren't there. For 15 years you weren't there. That's not my fault. I sent you a letter. You sent me lies. I pulled the letter from my bag. I'd brought it, not knowing why. Cape Hatteras. You said we went together when I was 12. We did. I was 10, and I went with Grandpa, not you. There's a picture. His face didn't change. The sparklers, 4th of July, you said you taught me. I remember. Grandpa taught me. Grandma took the picture. You weren't even in the state. That's not. My first day of high school, you said you drove me. You were in Asheville with Denise. Mom drove me. The room was completely silent. Patricia was staring at my father, her face unreadable. You don't have any memories with me, I said. Because you weren't there. So you took his memories, Grandpa's memories, and you pretended they were yours. I didn't. You did. I put the letter on the table. Someone helped you. Someone told you the stories, but they got the details wrong and Grandpa caught it. I looked at Patricia. Was it you? Patricia's face went red. I was trying to help. Help who? Him. I gestured at my father. Or yourself. Because if he got back in the will, you figured there'd be more to go around. That's exactly what it was. I stood up. You can contest the will if you want. Claire says you'll lose. And while you're fighting it, everyone can hear about the loan. The $60,000, the fake business that was just a cover for him and Denise. The letter he wrote asking for more money, promising to pay it back. My father's face went pale. How do you? Grandpa kept the documents. All of them. They're safe. Claire gathered her papers. I think we're done here. My father stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. He looked at Patricia, then at me, then at the door. This isn't over, he said. Yes, it is. He left. Patricia followed, not looking at me. Kevin mumbled something about being sorry and disappeared. Rachel was already gone. Claire waited until the room was empty. Are you all right? I thought about the question. I don't know. That's fair. She handed me a folder. The documents your grandfather mentioned. I made copies for my files, but the originals are yours now. I took the folder. 3 months later, I was standing in Grandpa's kitchen, my kitchen now, when someone knocked on the back door. It was Kevin. I'm not here about anything, he said quickly. Can I come in? I let him in. He stood by the counter, not sitting, not eating anything this time. I wanted to say I'm sorry, he said. About my mom, about all of it, I didn't know she was, he stopped. I should have asked more questions. Yeah, you should have. I know, he looked at the floor. I've been thinking about what you said, at the reading, about the letter, the memories. He shook his head. It was messed up, the whole thing. It was. My mom helped him write it. She told me afterward. She thought, I don't know what she thought, that if he could just get you to talk to him, everything would work out. It wouldn't have. No, I know that now. He finally looked at me. Are you staying in the house? Yeah, I'm staying. Good. He moved toward the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, Grandpa made the right choice. Leaving everything to you, he knew what he was doing. He left. I stood in the kitchen for a while, looking at the garden through the window. The tomatoes were coming in. Grandpa had planted them last spring, before he got too sick to work outside. I'd been watering them every day, not sure they'd survive. But they had. They were growing, green and stubborn, reaching toward the sun. I poured a glass of water and took it out to the back porch. The evening was warm, the sky going orange at the edges. Somewhere in the trees, a cardinal was singing. I sat down in Grandpa's chair, the one he'd sat in for 40 years, watching the sunset, and I listened.